Administration, it's going to really be excellent. So I think we're kind of in for a treat. And I wanted to start off, Craig, if you don't mind, because talk about the beginning stages, record production, the classic record that you did with Chris Whitley, who has passed away 2 years ago now, whatever.
Yeah, something like that.
You know, the first track in this called Scrapyard Lullaby was the one that I recorded out, and maybe you could just talk a little bit about how you approached Chris when he was. It's a very interesting. Sonically, this is considered an audiophile masterpiece, and it really is. I mean, it really is, and it's been.
Well, it's funny. It wasn't set out to be that at all.
Well, this is what I'd love to hear about it.
Chris, basically, for those that don't know him, was a fantastic singer-songwriter. Really beautiful, kind of folky, blues-based, rock and roll kind of character. A very tortured soul as well, but a beautiful, beautiful songwriter. We became friends a long time ago. I used him as a musician on a number of records I'd worked on. He was signed to Sony for a long time and was dropped. At the point he was dropped, Chris had just finished writing a new body of work, essentially what he was really looking at as like his next record, which is probably
this is 10 years old.
Yeah, it's probably most of the stuff. There's very few things that were actually left off of that, so that was going to be his next Sony record, essentially. So he was kind of frustrated that he couldn't put it out. And Chris is one of these people that I think is one of the things that's beautiful about music is when somebody actually they can just sit down at a piano or on a guitar or whatever, to sit down with their voice and sing a song. And you're just moved. It's like, you know, the great people that you see in the subway sometimes. You know, you're just stopped in your tracks. And that's what music is. It's all emotion. You just feel it, and nothing else matters. And Chris, it took a little bit to convince him that actually he could do well by just doing it on his own. So originally we had talked about, he didn't have a label, so we were just thinking that we would do it ourselves. So we talked about actually doing it in Chris's apartment in the West Village. So we spent a few months just going back and forth through material. We knew we were going to do something really simple. And just as we got ready to record, Chris said that his father had kind of gone away, and his dad had a cabin in Vermont that was empty. So we decided to go to the cabin in Vermont. So we really didn't have any budget to make a record. You know, we didn't have the money to go into a studio. We didn't really have the inclination to go into a studio. Music, Chris and I both shared the idea that music can be recorded anywhere, that it's the song. And as a producer or the engineers that do stuff, you deal with the issues of a room. But if it's a room that feels comfortable to the artist, you're going to get great performances. And Chris loved that cabin. And so we decided to go up there. So me, Chris, and an engineer loaded up a van. We took an old tape recorder, because it was the only thing we could find, a quarter-inch tape recorder. We took a stereo ribbon microphone. And for those of you that don't know about microphones, just briefly, ribbon technology is sort of one of the oldest technologies for microphones. It's very simple. It's literally just a super thin ribbon of metal that vibrates. And the vibrations are changed into an electrical signal, which is then boosted by an amplifier, or a pair of amplifiers in this case, to go to wherever you're going. So in this case, we took two very simple tube amplifiers, which were made by an audiophile. But they were made by Tim DePeravicini.
Crazy audiophile.
You know, yeah, but I found them at an auction. They were cheap. Nobody knew what they were, and they sound great. They work with ribbon mics. And so we went up to the cabin, and Chris and I both really loved the classic Robert Johnson recordings, where they were all done in a hotel, we really liked that. We liked that as a starting point. So we went up, and there was a kind of a woodshed motorcycle shop that was connected to the house, to the shack, basically. We set Chris up back there, and we led cables down from the microphone through a hallway into the kitchen. The engineer and I set up some monitors and the tape recorder in the kitchen, and that's how we did it. I mean, Chris usually stomped his foot when he played, so to deal with the vibrations from that, we took baling wire and hung the microphone from the ceiling so that we wouldn't get anything from a mic stand vibrating. And the main part of that recording was really about making Chris feel comfortable. And Chris could be incredibly unsure of himself. This is somebody who I think is as good as anybody ever has been, who could do something spectacular, and you're just sitting there weeping, and he's like, oh, man, that's terrible. I sucked. I got to do that again. And in this case, what me and the engineer did was continually, through the course of a day, just say, maybe it did, but, we got to go. Can't stay at the next song, And we just plowed through the material, and Chris was spectacular. So we did the entire record in a day, ordered pizza, had pizza, loaded up everything, and, drove back to the city. So we did the whole thing like that. We just knocked it out. The beautiful thing about a ribbon mic is that if you want to use it to simply capture what's there, it's spectacular at doing that. So what we got on tape was exactly what was happening in the room. You could walk into the room and it sounded like what got there. And it was interesting because I actually had the opportunity with this to go to an SACD as well as to go to vinyl. We just licensed it to a small record company. And then eventually Sony approached us actually about doing an experiment with SACD and came to you, Greg, and we did an SACD. And I have to agree, I think that SACD was it's as close as sitting down and listening to the master.
Right. So I want to jump in just so this is a very direct process. You heard Craig. So you have a microphone.
Yeah, it's as simple as you get. You can't
mic pre's.
Mic pre's. That's it.
Out of the mic pre's into a small mixer, or no?
Nope.
No.
Straight into a tape recorder.
Straight into a tape recorder.
Yeah.
So, and we'll talk a little bit. Hopefully,
and then
we'll get through the process.
And then we just monitored back.
Now you have a tape which comes into a mastering studio, and when it comes to cutting of vinyl, you're just going through an amplifier to get into the cutter head. So there's really
nothing's touched it. There's
very few things in between.
Yeah.
And if we were to ever have the time to describe to you what goes into making, Kevin would be able to detail what goes into making the average album now, and how many stages, how many digital conversions there are, and how many stages, and how many mults, and how many combinations of things. All by the time you actually get it at the end, you wouldn't believe it. We wouldn't have time to even talk about it. We'd have to have a weekend.